I am Kiera Pasante Houghton. I manage communications and strategic partnerships and a bunch of other fun stuff for Civil Rights Corps. We are basically a nonprofit law firm. So we are representing the plaintiffs in a lot of the criminalization of poverty issues that you may have heard about. I think most popularly the movement to end cash bail and money bail. Thank you. We've gotten a lot of really important and significant victories around that issue all across the country, including a really big one in the state of California that my colleague Catherine is here and can tell you about. She's one of the attorneys on that case, and she's actually also on our panel. But we have been really taking counties and parishes, because we have several cases in Louisiana too, and states to task about what it means to be poor, and how poverty and race are criminalized, as I said.
So let's set the stage for our conversation with a few statistics. Today, there are more than 2 million people caged in jails and prisons across the country. Of those people, nearly 500,000 sit behind bars day in and day out without being convicted of any crime. They simply cannot afford to pay money bail. Approximately 70 million people have criminal records, and 7 million children have or have had an incarcerated parent. It's clear that mass incarceration isn't simply tragic or something that we need to tackle, but it's a human rights crisis of epic proportions.
The number right now as it stands is about 1 in 2, so half of black women in this country have a family member who is incarcerated. I'm one of those black women. I have an uncle who's been incarcerated since I was 3, and I'm in my 30s. And then I have my older brother was just actually released a few months ago. He was doing a 22-year sentence for a crime he did not commit, and he did 12 years on that sentence.
As my beautiful sister said, my name is Monica. I'm the executive director of Sister Song. We're the National Women of Color Reproductive Justice Collective based in Atlanta, Georgia. And as we are celebrating 25 years of Essence, we are also celebrating 25 years of the reproductive justice movement that was created and founded by black women in this country. And so we have been fighting for over 25 years, for all of our lives, for our reproductive health and rights, but in particular around this particular model developed by black women in 1994 that knew that we had to advocate even more for our human right to have the children that we want, to not have children if we so choose, and to be able to end our pregnancies with dignity and without shame and safely and legally, and to be able to parent our children in healthy and safe environments, and to really be able to hone in on our human right to bodily autonomy. And we all watch the news every day, so we're very clear that our human right to bodily autonomy is under attack. We are sitting in a state amongst many southern states and national states all across this country who have enacted abortion bans. And so when we think about this intersection of criminalization and black women and our bodies, this conversation is expansive, and we have to be able to be at all the intersections of that conversation, which is why we feel it's important for reproductive justice to be a part of this conversation. So we're excited about that. We are working really, really hard. I'm not sure if you all heard the news, but Sister Song is suing the state of Georgia right now. There is a case that says Sister Song versus Kemp, which makes us happy for so many reasons, but in particular because we will not stand for our bodies to be put on the line for their political agenda.
So the way that the system works in almost every jurisdiction in this country right now is that someone gets arrested and they get taken to jail, and when they're at the jail, the sheriff's deputies will inform them that they can be released pending their trial, but only if they pay an amount of money. And of course, these people are presumptively innocent, but many thousands of people remain incarcerated pre-trial simply because they can't afford this arbitrary monetary payment. Just to give an example, my client was accused of going into his neighbor's apartment, stealing $5 and a bottle of cologne, and his bail was set at $600,000. Studies have shown that disproportionately black women are affected by having to pay bail. And of course that's because the criminal legal system is racist, and so it's it's black people who are most likely to be arrested, and therefore it's going to be on their families to pay those non-refundable fees to the bail bondsman to try to get their loved ones out of jail.
When we did some studies here in New Orleans, Holly Grove, which is where I come from, right? Holly Grove had one of the highest rates of infant mortality, right? So highest rate of prematurity, highest rate, but it also had some of the highest rates of incarceration. Right? So that same burden of trauma of dealing with having your family member, your spouse, your mate, the person with whom you're trying to raise a family, not able to be there with you, that trauma is left on the community, on the bodies. But how do we soften some of these rules and laws that you guys, the work that you all are doing around bail? I mean, we know that our prison here, our jail has been overpopulated for so long. I have had family members in Tallulah. I have had to put cash money. I remember my own godson calling me, Nanan, I didn't mean to do it, but it's all right. So that's like a common theme if you live here. And so then what happens, and it's not just here, the trauma on the communities afterwards. We know that maternal mortality and women dying in childbirth is not simply an issue around what happens inside of a hospital. The closures of all the hospitals besides uptown in New Orleans, so you can't have a baby unless you live uptown. So that's a system's choice, right? That's a choice that we've made. But the trauma around not having support from a loved one, from a family, of trying to put money on books, of trying to pay for phone calls, right? Those are really expensive. So all of those are things that most black folks know. This is not something we read in a book. It's something we've had to do. No matter our income, no matter what you see us, our education, so we're all human, that we all have been in this community together, and we have to think about our traumas and how that impacts our ability to do this work going forward.
The biggest barrier is if we're having a conversation about any kind of reform, and we're not talking about racism, classism, sexism, stop. Right? Because we already know that that's what connects all of this as a problem. And so that needs to be out front. We don't need to pretty it up because it's not pretty. You can say disproportionate minority contact all you want, but that just means you are attacking our kids in our community because you're a part of a racist system. And that's what we need to dismantle if we're going to ever really, really win. So.
Tamara, thinking about how Gina opened up her comments, with the importance of us being the experts when it comes to our own experiences, and being authorities on our own stories and our own lives, you have a unique perspective in this work as a victim survivor. We know that you're one of the plaintiffs in a lawsuit against the New Orleans district attorney who was illegally coercing and forcing victims to testify in cases where they weren't ready or feared retaliation. And in turn, this DA was also harassing victims and threatening them with jail time using false subpoenas. So, civil rights court case. Can you tell us about how your experiences have shaped the trajectory of your activist work?
Let me just first start by saying that I stand on the front lines and I represent families who don't have a voice or feel they don't have a voice. And I put myself on the front line to challenge the district attorney's office. I challenge the police department. I challenge our political figures. I challenge our legislation because I represent those families when I'm in the room and I hear their struggles and I listen to their stories. But when I made the point to challenge Leon Canizero, I won't even say district attorney, Leon. When I made the decision to challenge Leon, he came after me and he's still coming. Last year, this time I was arrested. He came after me and he's still coming, but I'm still standing. I'm still standing.